Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this latest webinar, which we are organizing as a Europe Direct Center hosted by. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this latest webinar, which we are organizing as a. Today, this webinar is actually the fourth out of a series of webinars through which we are covering the reforms and investments which are being carried out by Malta through its EU-funded Recovery and Resilience Plan. So just as a reminder for those who are watching us for the first time, the Recovery and Resilience Plan is a facility which is funded by the European Union within the context of Next Generation EU, which is actually a financial instrument which is in excess of 800 billion. And it is aimed at repairing the immediate economic and social damage brought about by the coronavirus pandemic. So through this facility, we're aiming at creating a post-COVID-19 Europe, which will be greener, more digital, more resilient, and ultimately a better fit for the coming and forthcoming challenges. Malta's Recovery and Resilience Plan in itself envisages a total expenditure of 345 million, and it is based on 6 main components. And today, through this webinar, we will be focusing on component number 2, which is decarbonising transport. Now, the reforms and investments which are envisaged under this component address the country's specific recommendations issued by the European Commission, both in 2019 and 2020. And the focus is on the green transition, on sustainable transport, and the reduction of traffic congestion. So to zoom into these reforms and investments, today I am pleased once again to welcome a very esteemed panel of guests. So we have Ms. Alexandra Klenka, who is a policy officer within the DG Mobility and Transport within the European Commission. Good morning, Alexandra. Thank you for being with us. Jeffrey De Bono, who is here today representing the Malta Chamber of Commerce, Enterprise and Industry. We also have Jeanette Axisa, the Director General within the Foundation for Transport. Good morning to you, Jeanette, as well. And last but not least, Lucia Meila, who is the Director, Policy Development and Program Implementation within the Office of the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry for Transport. Good morning to you as well, Lucienne.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you everyone for being here. And I'd like to start off the webinar today by inviting Ms. Klenke to deliver her introductory presentation, through which she will give us an overview of the policy framework from a European dimension. In your good hands, Alexandra. Good morning.
Good morning. So maybe first I will introduce myself. So actually, yes, I'm representing the Directorate of Mobility and Transport in the European Commission and working in the unit which exactly works on the policy on sustainable and intelligent transport. And yeah, I will now share with you the presentation so you can maybe better visualize what I'm saying. One moment. Could you see my presentation?
Yes, we see it. Thank you, Alexandra.
So I'm sorry for this little technical hiccup, and I will start. Actually, you said about decarbonization of transport, and this policy of decarbonization has been set very clearly in the strategy, Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy, which was adopted in 2020 as a following of European Green Deal. Probably you know this, but just to remind that decarbonization is one of the angle. Another angle is smart and resilient, so digitalization and making the system resilient as a following of COVID crisis. And just to remind the most important milestones, which I think would be the most relevant for Malta, given its specific geographic location and transport conditions. So by 2030, we expect 30 million euro emission cars and 80,000 zero emission lorries in operation, 100 climate neutral cities. We expect that there would be increase in the short sea shipping by 25%. That by 2030 also first zero emission ocean going vessels could be ready for the market. And the same we expect for aircraft by 2035, of course, depending on the progress, on the development of a technological progress. The vision is that by 2050, we have carbon neutral transport system. So we have nearly all cars, vans and buses, as well as new heavy duty vehicles, zero emission. And that we even more than double short sea shipping by 50%. And that also all trans-European networks are equipped for sustainable and smart transport with high-speed connectivity. Now, the first like a big step of implementation of the strategy was the adoption proposal of a package Fit for 55 by the Commission in July 2021, which aimed at bringing EU policy framework in line with the objective of even more ambitious reduction by 2030 of CO2 emission by 55%. And now 13 initiatives which were proposed, 11 of them were with direct effect on transport. And we could see this in the following architecture of a package, which focus on the pricing, for carbon, on new targets, on new rules. So, for example, new rules for stricter rules for CO2 performance for cars and vans, targets, for example, new targets for renewable energy production, pricing, for example, by extending emission trading to maritime and road transport. There was also including supportive measures like social climate fund. So this proposed approach was based on the impact assessments, very well thought through. And these all proposals are interconnected, and they represent a balance between strengthened carbon pricing, so that the emissions, they have such a price that they can incentivize consumers, producers, innovators to choose clean technology, which we already, for example, see on the example of the automotive market, where producers, they propose more and more models of electric vehicles, exactly following the clear signal from the policy part. A number of regulatory measures, so new targets, new standards, and support measures, as I mentioned, the fund to provide help for member states to support their citizens which are at risk of energy or mobility poverty. What this set of proposals so combines from one side application of emission trading system to new sectors, increased use of renewable energy, which we need, especially now in the context of a conflict in Ukraine, greater energy efficiency, a faster rollout of low emission transport modes, for example, electric vehicles, and the infrastructure and fuels to support them, an alignment of taxation policy with the European Green Deal objectives. Then finally, measures to prevent carbon leakage, and the tools to preserve and grow natural carbon sinks. So this coherence is important, and we hope in the Commission that all these proposals could be adopted following our ambitions by co-deciders. Some of them, they are already now at the level of general approach at the Council, and we hope, for example, on some of them to start negotiations soon. Now, I see that for Malta, the road transport is at the same time one of the most important way of mobility, and it is also the challenge because of congestion and the pollution. So one way of decarbonization would be um, mm, to increase the share of electric vehicles, both in public transport and in private vehicles, among private vehicles. And the problem for whole Europe is that the infrastructure for recharging is first is localized in majority in 3 member states, basically, and then the lot of this infrastructure is missing that you can see on this map, and that's why it's also, I think, the challenge for Malta. And I've seen that the efforts that and your plans in the recovery and resilience plans are also directed in this, partially in this direction. And with the aim to respond to this challenge, we have proposed in July 21 the proposal on alternative fuel infrastructure regulation. I will not bore you with all the all the proposal, but just to pinpoint the main advance, which is proposal of mandatory targets to all member states to ensure that there is a comprehensive network of this infrastructure throughout Europe and in the member states itself. So as you see, there are 3 types of targets for light duty vehicles, fleet-based targets, which will simply follow like it depends how the market develops, how many electric cars are on the market, then the target for member states will be different, but there will be also distance-based targets, which will be important for all the TNT network. In Malta, also important to go from one side to another of your country. You are not connected to other countries in this way, but for the continent Europe, it is primordial. Then for heavy-duty vehicles, there will be distance-based targets, but also location-based. So just to ensure that there is enough of infrastructure in urban nodes and in safe and secure parkings for drivers of lorries. We have also the proposal for mandatory targets for hydrogen refueling stations, as we see this as a important carrier of energy, especially for heavy-duty vehicles. Just to also tell that apart from this legislative arm that we have to push the market, to help market develop, we have also different flanking measures, which were described in the strategic plan, rollout plan, which were like communication, also adopted by in the package of Fit for 55. And one if important part, if probably you know this, but if you don't know, it's good to know that there is a Sustainable Transport Forum led by the Commission, and with participation of stakeholders, we work on different ways how support, for example, local authorities, how to plan the deployment of infrastructure, for example, electric vehicles in the most optimal way, how to the best plan the permitting, the concession, the procurement processes. We have managed already to propose some handbook and recommendations, and we are working for the future on a further guide, for example, for permitting and grid connection, so important adjustment to the electricity grids, or for example, for rollout for specialized and captive fleets like taxis. So we hope that it is, we see that it is already the help for some local authorities. Maybe it could be also the use for Malta. Then also important source of information, European Alternative Fuels Observatory, also led by my colleagues in my units, where you can find really update data on infrastructure, but also where there is a new dedicated knowledge platform for public authorities. Then the financial arm, which is without you cannot sometimes push the changes. The Connecting Europe facility and its alternative fuels infrastructure facility proposes help to finance publicly accessible recharging station dedicated to light-duty vehicles or to trucks, or electricity recharging for public transport, and also hydrogen refueling stations. So this is also to remember for different players like public or private players in Malta that this facility is open and it has already started to finance projects. Finally, in my unit, we are working as well on making this electromobility ecosystem work effectively from the point of view of data exchange. And the aim is to first to be able to propose smart recharging infrastructure in time, and to also propose different services to drivers, including seamless localization of recharging stations, booking, payments, billing processes, which I think is an important factor when we want to convince private drivers to change from normal like petrol car to electric cars, and to get them on board, which I think could be as well the challenge in for Malta. Then I would like just to complete that there was a second part of the package which was adopted in December 21, when there are also important pieces of like policy framework, starting with revision of TNT guidelines for TNT network, with a revision of Intelligent Transport System Directive, and with a new urban mobility policy framework. So it's going without say that this change of ITS rules can also make the whole system, transport system, working more efficiently and save unnecessarily use of fuels and energy. So it is important for the decarbonization with all its different components. Now, as I see how important for you is the road transport and the urban mobility, I would like just to pinpoint to some elements of a new EU urban mobility framework which has been proposed. So there are some elements which are important, for example, the accent on more safe cycling infrastructure and active mobility opportunities, which I believe is part of a program for Malta. Harmonizing rules across the EU for urban vehicle access regulation and micromobility. Developing EU sustainable urban mobility indicators, using cargo bicycles and zero-emission vans for e-commerce, making sustainable urban mobility plans obligatory and linking EU funding to them, greening fleets, recharging infrastructures. So all these elements which are important for both for you and for other so congested area in the EU. And here, just to attract your attention to the TNT regulation, in the proposals, it increases the number of urban nodes to 424, with a sustainable urban mobility plans to be presented by 2025. With a selection and submission of urban mobility data to fit indicator, for example, on greenhouse gas emission, on congestions. So this indicator could help to see what is the progress and to adapt adequately the policies. As well, there are multimodal freight terminals to ensure sustainable urban logistics. based on a comprehensive analysis at member states level. Also multimodal passenger hubs, including, for example, park and ride facilities, so to improve first and last mile connection and to enhance the necessary capacities for long distance connectivity in and between urban nodes. Then finally, with passenger enabled to access better information, book, pay, retrieve transport tickets by 2030. So increasing multimodal digital mobility. And then promotion of efficient and low noise zero emission transport and mobility. Then I would like to attract the attention as well to the Commission recommendation to put in place national long-term sustainable urban mobility plans, support programs with a national program manager and implement these plans in compliance with the European guidelines to set clear priorities to favor a sustainable solution, including active, collecting, a public transport, and with referencing new methods like zero emission mobility, and reflecting new EU policies and strategies, including Repower EU, which was a late response to the changes provoked by the conflict in Ukraine. Then there is also another important element, mobility management plans, which we think they should be encouraged in public, but also in private organization to develop such a plans, and where you can find case studies on mobility management on LTs, so the Urban Mobility Observatory, just to be inspired and looking for examples. Finally, I mentioned before this lack for the moment of monitoring and like a common approach of monitoring of urban mobility, and that there is a pilot project which has tested a set of sustainable urban mobility indicators and provided a related benchmarking tool. And then a preparatory approach is proposed, so in 2022 to improve and streamline the set of these 19 indicators, and 2023 to launch a program, a support auction for member states under the Connecting Europe facility to collect data for harmonized mobility indicators. And this is in view of the proposed requirements for data collection by the urban nodes on the TNT networks. Finally, I would come to the walking, cycling, micromobility, which I understand that you would like to develop more on Malta. However, you face probably challenge in adapting infrastructure to this kind of way of moving. So EU policy, of course, support this, and we think that it is also a good way to encourage well-being and health, of course, under condition that there are enough of secure bicycle lines and it is safe, and people are offered really attractive choices to choose this. As we also believe that people will not choose another way of transport if public transport or micromobility, it's not attractive, it's not convenient enough. So main action proposed on this is TNT regulation proposal on urban nodes. So multimodal passenger hubs, as I mentioned, they are supposed to better integrate active transport modes to ensure the continuity, accessibility of pedestrian and cycling paths, and in order to promote active modes of transport. And when building, upgrading road and rail infrastructures. There is also new priorities for urban nodes, promotion of efficient and low noise, zero emission transport and mobility, including greening urban fleets and increasing the modal share of public transport and active modes in the overall transport. So thank you very much. I think I have given you a lot of details and probably maybe even too much. But as I seen that I have 25 minutes, I understood that you need a global view. So I enlarge my presentation to urban mobility, as I've seen that it is one of your main focus. Of course, I want to just still to add that we also fund these elements like this new place for ferries to be that they are able to use electricity or other sustainable fuels, also very important, and the decarbonization of maritime transport as well. But I focus just on your priority just now. So thank you very much, and I hope that I was clear, and I'm looking forward to the questions or any comments if you want from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. Yes, that was very comprehensive. I think as well it has given us a lot to reflect on, and also to start really assessing the implications of all the changes which are happening both at the European level and then obviously at the national level. And in fact, I was going to ask our panelists for their reactions before we actually zoom into the RRP and the measures and investments which are being implemented within that context. I don't know who'd like to start. I'm sure you're all very eager to share some thoughts.
I'm happy to start. Oh, someone else will. Okay, Janet.
No, it's okay, Jeffrey. I'll go after you. Sorry.
As you wish. Okay. So first of all, Alexandra, thank you for a very interesting presentation. I think you really captured well the holistic mobility challenges that the EU is facing, and also specifically Malta. From a local player in the industry, in the mobility space, we see that there is a big dependence right now on the private vehicle, which accounts for more than 80% of trips made by passengers, by people that need to travel, and that there are new initiatives coming to the block which can help move people towards more collective means of transportation, and also multimodal. So not just seeing as a trip only from using one's private vehicle from A to B, but using different modes to get to the same conclusion. So we believe that this is the way that to go forward. There's no silver bullet to the situation. It is a challenging situation. It's not something that can be overcome overnight, but definitely needs address.
Thanks, Jeff. Janet?
Yeah, just an initial comment. Thank you, Alexandra and Jeffrey, and good morning to everyone. I just wanted to say a few things about 4 points, but I will be able to explore a bit more later on during our discussion. First and foremost, greening of fleets. Here in Malta, we have 8,200 electric vehicles as compared to 400,000 plus fossil fuel, powered by fossil fuel engines. And only 13% are tied up to some corporate utility. That means it's either on the courier service or delivery. In Europe, in other member states, the percentage is about 66%. So there is way for improvement from the business side to use more electric vehicles, electric vans, electric lorries, if they exist, to do the deliveries, to do the part of the planning and logistics, to do courier service and so on. Now, as Jeffrey said, this is no just a silver bullet or just an overnight thing, but with pilot projects, which the foundation is doing, but moreover, with schemes and incentives, specifically focusing on the needs of entrepreneurs. Together with working capital, I think there should be a good way forward and a good incentive for businesses to start considering electrification in deliveries, in their corporate use. That's point number one. The second one is about infrastructure and about the charging pillar. In Europe, in Germany and other Northern European countries, there are specific agencies financing not only the concept, but financing the rolling out of charging infrastructure. Now, it could be a private, it could be semi-public and public. And I think we should look at these solutions as well. Thirdly, holistic solution. I think Malta is after greening the island concepts. So if we see that, for example, the largest plant in hydrogen is now operating in Spain, that Poland has become the largest manufacturer of electric buses, that Norway will soon have an airport receiving aircraft with zero emission technologies, I think being part of all this, Malta as an island has to take care also of infrastructure in the coming years that can receive aircraft and vessels with different technologies. So it is good that we are emphasizing on road transport, and it should be that way because we have something to as a challenge. The most, let's say, short-term challenge involves road transport, but we need to have a holistic approach towards other modes of transport too. And fourthly, the challenge is skills. Having the best business models and having the best incentives will require having the right skills at the right time. For now, I rest my case and I leave the floor to others. Thank you. Lucian, I think you can
yes, I think I can.
Because we lost Roberta, okay. I
think so, yes.
Yes, I'd like to thank you very much for the very good overview and the updating, in fact, on all the initiatives and documents and guidelines and recommendations and the recent success at the Transport Council of Ministers in attaining the general approach on 3 of the very more focused transport-related proposals of the Fit for 55 package. We were, of course, very active in the discussions, not only on those 3, but also on others, but on alternative fuels, maritime and aviation fuel EU proposals, we were, of course, we had our concerns, we did, negotiate things to fine-tune their adaptiveness to our specific situation. And I think overall, we are quite happy with the general approach reached. And of course, as you rightly point out, there is the Repower EU, which is giving us even more ambition than the Fit for 55. And this together with the RRP and the efforts that have already started on our part, which I will have time to delve into shortly, I think this we are on the right track. As you very well pointed out, Alexandra, there is a link between decarbonization and making things smarter, digitalization, especially in a country so densely populated like ours, so overcrowded with cars and persons, but cars especially. I think, yes, I think with these tools, we are on the right path to seek the solutions, both in the medium term to 2030 and in the longer term to 2050. I will discuss this later. I'm sure we'll have a very good discussion with all the right ingredients. Thank you.
I don't know, Alexandra, whether I would like to add on a few points to our initial reactions.
Yes, with pleasure. If there is a time, it's great. No, I thank you very much. To Jeffrey, I think yes that it's the most important to encourage people to take on different modes. However, sometimes maybe the proper incentives are important. For example, as Jeanette said, that for example, enterprises have a policy of giving to their employees electric cars, you know, or at least plugged-in electric cars. So they already promote by, for example, in Belgium, it's a big part of car fleet because there are a lot of company cars. So if companies have a different policies, it already helps. And as well, this kind of, you know, big car fleets like taxis, like urban deliveries, exactly. We also prepare these guidelines for making them electrified in the framework of Sustainable Transport Forum. So maybe you can look in the while and see if it can be something that you can use, you know, to advance. And maybe just in general, I think that Malta has a lot of possibilities still for more production of renewable energy, and you know, to ensure more synergies between energy and so to use directly renewable, you know, energy for transport purposes. And maybe what happened in Ukraine can give you more stimulus towards this area, which is challenging, but also give a kind of strategic independence for the country. And in terms of this financing, I think that it is exactly maybe also good that you look at this guidance of STF, how other local authorities finance this, what kind of business model they apply, if it is procurement or concessions, you know, because there are different models, so much different, but and it depends what you need, you know, but you can be inspired, and then you don't need to repeat maybe mistakes which were done by front runners. And I really encourage also to look at this AFIF from CEF, you know, because there is like a €1.5 billion, you know, to spend, and I think that it requires to, you know, make a business case. It should be a big project, so it's maybe sometimes difficult to find such a partners, but maybe it's worth to inquire, because the money is here. So, and there are also other sources. I didn't mention other funds, but I can as well mention. But I suppose that, Lucien, you are very much aware of this different funding at the European level, and we are also, of course, happy by the general approach, especially by the AFIR, where we think that our ambition is somehow kept, and we have also industry on our side. So I think it should happen sooner than later. And just from our side, that we are also waiting for, you know, from the industry can in some years propose more and more models which are affordable for more people, you know, not only the richest part of a society. This, I think, will be a breaking point for this market. Okay, thank you. So I will not monopolize the space.
If I can make a comment, if I may, Alexander, on your comment on electrification, vehicle electrification, I believe Malta has a target of 65,000 vehicles by 2030 to be electrified. On your comment about automakers, I believe that automakers right now have a number of other challenges, not just electrification, which include supply chain and also mostly supply chain, which is obviously making the business constraints even harder. I also believe there are alternative means. So there are solutions such as hybrid and hydrogen, which could also pave the way, including plug-in electric hybrids, that can drive the path to a future. Right now, speaking from our perspective, where we see customers coming in to buy a car, they have challenges to charge their vehicles. So given these constraints are present at this time, I know that by time they will not. But this point in time, I believe that there has to be a transitionary approach where one starts to migrate slowly to a future mode of transportation, but also respecting and appreciating the challenges that exist within the current infrastructure today.
Thank you. Thanks for that reaction. I wanted to apologize for the disruption. We have experienced a power cut, but luckily we managed to reconnect. So I apologize if you have already tackled this, but I wanted to ask Lucien perhaps to just give us some insight on the actual measures which are being rolled out in order to address some of the challenges that we have been discussing until now.
Yes, so basically I'll run you through. You know, as was already said, transport is our daily life. I mean, most of us depend on it. And government is therefore on the way to pave the way to ensure that our system, our transport system, and our economy become greener and more sustainable. I'm going to focus on the RRP. The RRP measures promote this, okay, by addressing the challenges of greenhouse gas emissions from transport and to shift traffic from the individual private car to more sustainable modes. So the first point is to improve, the first target we have is to improve transport planning within our localities. And this is one of the two main measures under the RRP that contribute towards a more sustainable modal practice in our urban mobility system. At the moment, Transport Malta is working on a sustainable urban mobility plan for the Valletta region. When I say the Valletta region, I don't mean Valletta, I mean 27 local councils that come with it. It's an urban node, which covers a third of the Maltese population. As you know, the population of Malta is very much focused in that area. During the coming weeks and months, consultation will be initiated with the local councils of the northern and southern harbour regions so that together a sustainable plan can be developed. The idea is to have a good plan assessing the impact of the measures proposed so that the most sustainable approach is taken, whilst taking into account the needs of the localities in question. The measures in the sum shall include such measures like parking policy, localization and implementation of transport hubs, cycling and walking infrastructure, car sharing and on-demand transport services, enforcement, electric vehicles, and urban logistics. The measures can be both short-term, with implementation within the next 3-year period, medium-term, with implementation envisaged in the next 4 to 6 years, or long-term, in the next 7 to 10 years. Once a plan is agreed to, then the aim will be to start the actual implementation of the measures in at least 9 localities within these regions. Together with the local councils, we shall also aim to implement a series of measures to promote the regeneration of public spaces and community spaces of villages and town centres. We'll do this through increased pedestrianisation zones and slow streets, increased connectivity for public transport use, and more opportunities to walk or cycle for short distances. And by doing this, we will effectively instill a more sustainable and healthy approach within our localities. During the pandemic, we already saw that many people were questioning the traditional quality of life and their lifestyle, and they called for increased public spaces. Space became an issue during the pandemic, less traffic congestion, more sustainable approaches to life, remote working, and more tranquil places for leisure time. Through this investment, we believe that the public will have more opportunity to enjoy safe and secure spaces, which will in turn have the potential to create more opportunities for the business community, within urban village centres. We're not inventing something new here, really, but we are promoting a different way of doing it by planning a more effective traffic management system that favours sustainable mobility within our localities. To decarbonise transport, we must make public transport, cycling and walking the natural first choice for all who can't make it. Many journeys to Malta are short, and therefore there is a lot of potential here. The Ministry of Transport, together with Transport Malta, will be launching a nationwide awareness-raising campaign towards the end of this year, so that we stimulate the adoption of more sustainable mobility practices all over our island. The aim is to promote more green transport, multimodality for essential travel, and more sustainable mobility systems across both Malta and Gozo. Everyone's contribution, including that of the business community, to move towards more sustainable practices will obviously be needed to complement government's efforts in this area. There are, of course, a lot of ways the business community can help. To mention some examples, these include the provision of more sustainable modal services, including e-bikes, car sharing and carpooling, more green modes of transport for deliveries, and more investment in online services that are appealing and user-friendly. For public transport, the government is currently looking at promoting the change of the public transport fleet from diesel-powered buses to electric buses. There are already 2 buses running around on our routes, launched recently by the transport operator, and we have in the pipeline 102 buses which shall be replaced, which will be replacing the diesel. 102 diesel buses will be replaced by electric buses by 2025. And that comes with the RRP. Electrification is, of course, an important aspect, which has already been referred to here this morning. And this is important in all modes of transport. And the government is in the forefront of this change, of this transition to electrification. Not to mention the many grants that government has been given long before we had funding by any EU fund. We use national funds to do this. We now obviously are accelerating this and using RRP funding to finance this rollout. But in other forms of transport, in fact, like the new ferry landing site that the RRP will fund in Bujibba, we are also thinking ahead, and we will be introducing electric charging facilities for vessels here, and not only vehicles, for vessels. The technology might not be readily available today, but in the near future, we envisage that more opportunities for low-emission vessels will be possible and also introduced in Malta. So we are preparing the infrastructure so that it is readily available. Furthermore, this ferry landing site will be acting as a transport hub. So we have here the multimodal aspect by promoting increased use of public transport through better connectivity and the use of waterborne transport for essential travel, shifting away a part of our present road trips onto the sea. Last but not least, electrification is being supported by various grants for electric vehicles, which are issued for the public and the private sector. 50 million euro in grants over 3 years are being funded through the RRP, targeting new electric vehicles. These grants provide incentives to instigate a wider uptake towards electric mobility, which should help to reduce emissions on our roads. The commercial sector is also being targeted here. There are various grants for passenger vehicles, for vehicles carrying goods, minibuses, coaches, motorbikes, quadricycles, and pedelecs too. The uptake is promising. And while we know that there are some limitations in terms of production, as rightly mentioned earlier, we expect that these grants shall contribute to the increase in this share of electric vehicles in Malta and Gozo. Really, we don't look at decarbonisation of transport as an option, but rather it is a commitment which Malta as a country has made at an EU level, and through its national recovery and resilience plan, this will have to happen. Changing how we travel is, of course, a challenge for all of us. But definitely in this transition, in this major change, the private sector can lead in this area and it can indeed be a pioneer in investing in more sustainable practices. Technology, as also mentioned earlier, can create new ways of how people and goods move around, or perhaps avoid moving around too. And government is doing its utmost, but the business community is best placed to enable the lead to shift towards more sustainable mobility. There are obviously other aspects to this. There is remote working that we have seen as a result of the pandemic being accelerated and explored. The meeting we have here today would have been probably a physical meeting had we not made use of the technology that we have available. And in the pandemic, we used this because we had no choice. So necessity was the mother of invention, really. Today, we are also seeing that remote working is something that government has even amongst its workforce. The policy, in fact, on remote working came into effect in October 2021 and will be then fully enforced by April 2023. During this transition period, of course, ministries and heads of departments are identifying the conversions needed, the apparatus needed, so that this transition is smoothly made throughout the government sector. As you know, the government sector is the biggest employer in Malta, so this will be a substantial move. There is, of course, need for training. This is being offered by in-house as well, and remote working spaces so that employees can also not feel so remote and out of the system, but also there are ways to tackle that. And of course, there's the element of equipment and data connectivity. All of this is, of course, part of the remote working policy that government has. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucian. That's very comprehensive. I think it's encouraging to hear that there is so much happening, both in terms of investments being implemented through the Recovery and Resilience Facility and also through other complementary instruments. So I think that there's a lot of change happening. Janet, how geared up are we for this change? And how are we going to transition in a way that doesn't leave anyone behind?
So two things, I think. One of them, obviously, from the business perspective, even from the survey we had carried out, businesses want to do this transition. So they are keen to embark upon this journey. Let's call it a journey. And obviously they're going into various studies and pilot projects so that they are keen to do it. Financial and supply chain problems obviously are something that they need to address, but this is another challenge that we need to face from a business perspective. We had COVID, we have various geopolitical conditions, but I think they want to embrace it. So first. Secondly, I think we also need to look, and this is being done, I have to admit, from a green building regulations. What do I mean? So if we have 70% of the residents of Malta who do not have either a garage or a garage supplied by electric power, we need to have a charging infrastructure that includes ultra charging hubs that provide a fast and efficient way and that can complement incentives, and they can complement also the availability of electric vehicles at a price that is reachable by everyone. So another puzzle, another piece of the puzzle. So we have, first we said we need to have electric vehicles that are available at a price reachable to everyone. Secondly, we said businesses will need to have obviously some incentives and some working capital. But thirdly, there has to be the infrastructure and the regulations for the infrastructure. So ultra charging infrastructure hubs is necessary. Obviously, we need to have, like for example, when we build our roads, we need to allow for this charging infrastructure. I don't think we are doing it right now. I know there's a big effort going into building regulations. For example, when we build our footpaths, when we build our cycling paths, when we build lampposts, which can be used as charging pillars, like other EU member states. So we need this again, this holistic approach. And you have asked me whether we are geared and where do we start? I think there is the urge. We can experience the urge. Now it's a question of working together. And I am encouraged by what Lucienne said this morning. There is a big impact on a way forward from the transport side. So if we start having like a national awareness campaign and the businesses are ready to participate in it, from everyone, I think it will be a necessary first step, even if they can participate in using the funds in the recovery plan for this transition, whether it's through schemes or it's through a public call, and they will participate in a public call for tenders through either the transport ministry or transport regulator. I think it's a way forward. So yes, there is the urge, there is the need, and there is the enthusiasm, I think.
Jeffrey, the Recovery and Resilience Plan was to a certain extent criticized because the investments were more geared towards the public sector rather than the private sector. As an economic player yourself, and you're also obviously in touch with other players within the industry, also through your involvement with the Chamber of Commerce, what kind of support do you think that businesses need to be able to be part of this transition?
Interesting question. I believe that there are a number of initiatives that can support the private sector, and I will mention one specifically, which would be green travel plans. So supporting businesses to move their employees from using their private vehicle to come to work, but use shared on-demand services. And I believe such services will help alleviate business challenges, such as providing for parking, which is, or as we all know, a major challenge locally, but also giving the employees the ability to win back time that they currently spend in traffic on a daily basis to do other things that they love. So I believe that could be one thing that can help. Everything that's done to improve congestion will have an indirect impact on companies' bottom line, because ultimately traffic is robbing businesses from productivity, impact on employee motivation after frustrating journey to work. So I feel that there are ways and means how government can intervene to help and motivate businesses to switch to more sustainable means of transportation, both for their own operations, but also for their employees.
Interesting. Lucian, you mentioned that there will be a consultation in relation to the Valletta Urban Mobility Plan, correct?
Yes.
And what is the timeline for that?
Oh, I believe it is. There are two consultations. For the Valletta one, it's the course of this year, however. Both of them are the course of this year.
Okay.
And I'm mixing up the two of them. That's the problem. But they are the course of this year. I believe for the Valletta one.
It could be a space also for the business community to also forward.
Definitely. The business communities that will definitely be involved. Yes.
Thank you. Some final reactions before we start wrapping up.
I mean, from my perspective, I can make a comment. I think it's been a very interesting discussion, and also the fact that there is a holistic approach to the situation is encouraging. As my colleagues mentioned earlier, I believe it is important that now we all come together to make this change happen, because that is the only way it can happen. So I feel encouraged and excited about what lies ahead.
Great, and I support what you have said a lot. I think that the only way to get results really, which have a positive impact on everyone, is that we work together. So I really agree with what you're saying. Jeanette?
Well, not to end up in a controversial note, but I would like to put forward two things. Technology is racing, true, but I think in some vehicles, we need to have an interim solution. Sometimes, like the heavy commercial vehicles, like those for waste collection, or the heavy construction vehicles, sometimes an interim, less polluting solution is workable in the short term. So I think one would like to consider whether that is possible to finance, to put forward, so that the business community, all the business community, irrespective of the type of vehicles used, I think are part of this transition. That's first. And secondly, perhaps, and this, it could be like for a policymaker or the ministry, we can consider, let's say, polluter pay tax, and we start charging more in registration fees or in road license, those vehicles that pollute more. I know
you're going to have a lot of resistance.
I know, and obviously, but it's something we need to consider slowly, so that we, number one, we reduce the number of vehicles on the road. We need to. That is one of the solutions. And secondly, if we need to have vehicles on the road, they are less polluting, so that we all, I mean, I'm talking from a business perspective, but obviously all who is employed or an employer is also a private citizen. So it has a dual effect on all this. So those are my final points. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette, and also for your good work. Lucienne.
Yes. From my end, so I thought I was mute. From my end, I didn't mention all of the initiatives that government is doing at the moment. There's the ship to shore, okay, the supply of electricity to ships berthed in our Grand Harbour, and eventually the Freeport as well. There's a rollout of a plan. Work has already started. So there we have EU funding, we have national funding as a whole mix. So there are other efforts. We also, as a ministry, will be participating, and we're very excited about this. My office is very excited about this, in a TSI, technical assistance from the Commission on hydrogen in transport. So that is very exciting, because obviously hydrogen, we see hydrogen as the future for heavy goods vehicles, and hopefully will give the answers to the larger trucks, perhaps even buses in the future. We'll have to find a solution for those. Obviously, I urge the business community and everyone hearing to participate in the webinars which we'll be having and the consultations, because obviously this is a journey which we do together. It's not exactly government doing everything on its own, or the private sector, being interested, and we have to work together. Definitely agree with what Jeffrey said, and definitely we look forward to your inputs and participation and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucienne. Alexandra, may I give you the last word?
Yes, I wanted just to thank you also to see all this feedback from the grant, from what has been done in Malta, and I think that exactly this kind of systemic approach is the most important, that you well prepare, for example, where to deploy this, for example, infrastructure for electric vehicles, that you'd also not over-invest, because this can be also possible that you don't spend unnecessary money, and maybe see where it's possible then people use. Some people could still have possibility in their garages, or or you can exactly make kind of overnight charging on the streets, which is less expensive or that fast charging points, and which are maybe more important on the suburban ways, when you really need to charge quickly to get from one city to another. And I wanted to add that maybe you are I see that you are hesitating over kind of taxation methods to give kind of a signal to the users, you know, so the polluters pays, you know, principle. I think that you can maybe start by some gentle ways, for example, like giving priority for parkings for electric vehicles, you know, in the city. If you have problems anyway with parking, then it already gives a kind of signal that these cars are at least for certain moment they have a privilege. But you know, it's not up to the commission to, of course, you know, but there are different ways in different countries used, and sometimes you can see some kind of congestion, you know, payments, and where the vehicles which are cleaner that pay less, and you know, so but I believe that you can propose it when you really improve public transport. So when people have another choice, then I think it's a fair proposal. So just a kind of examples from other cities that I see that sometimes it can influence the choices of the drivers. Yeah. So thank you very much. I really like the discussion.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, to you, to all our panelists today. I think we have managed to bring something which sounds and feels so distant, like the recovery and resilience plan. You know, it feels like something so high level to most of us, but really and truly, these are measures which are going to impact us as business owners and also as private citizens. So thank you so much for participating in this discussion, and I thank you all for your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you and good day.
Thank you very much.